The wedding hall shimmered with golden lights, soft music and laughter floating through the air. It was one of those evenings that felt perfect, where every table was covered with white roses and crystal glasses, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh food. Guests in elegant clothes moved about, chatting and laughing, while waiters hurried between tables with trays full of drinks. Among them was Maya, a quiet young woman working as a server for the night. She wore a simple black uniform and her hair was neatly tied back. She kept her eyes down most of the time. Careful not to draw attention, she wasn't there to mingle. She was there to do her job and go home. Maya was polite, efficient, and invisible. Most guests didn't even notice her. But one man did. He was sitting near the piano, a sleek black grand piano placed beside the stage where the band had taken a break. He looked bored, swirling the champagne in his glass. His friends joked loudly beside him, laughing about how fancy the wedding was. Then suddenly he noticed Maya walking past. Her hands were steady as she poured wine into his glass. But something about her calmness caught his attention. Maybe it was her posture, maybe her eyes, or maybe it was just boredom. But he suddenly smirked and said, "Hey, do you play the piano?" Maya froze for a second. The question came out of nowhere, and she looked up, surprised. Her lips parted slightly as if to answer, but no words came out. She gave a small, polite smile and shook her head quickly. The man leaned back, teasing, "Oh, come on. Everyone can play a little, right? Try something. I bet you can hit a few notes." His friends laughed, amused at his idea. And soon others nearby turned their heads to see what was happening. The catering manager standing near the buffet frowned. He didn't like where this was going. "Sir, she's just part of the staff," he said carefully. "She's not allowed to use the instruments." But the man waved him off with a grin. "Relax, it's a party, let her try. I'm just curious." The bride and groom, noticing the small commotion, looked over too. The groom chuckled, whispering something to his bride, and she nodded slightly. Maybe curious herself, Maya felt her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't want to cause trouble. She wanted to disappear back into the crowd of waiters. But deep down, something in her stirred, a quiet echo she hadn't felt in years. The sight of that piano, polished and perfect under the lights, was pulling her back to another time, another life. She took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the tray down on a nearby table. The manager looked at her with worry. "Maya, you don't have to," he whispered. But she gave him a small, calm smile. "It's okay," she said softly, and started walking toward the piano. The crowd quieted, the laughter faded into whispers. A few phones were already raised to record whatever was about to happen. The man who had asked her leaned forward, a playful smirk still on his face. He clearly expected her to fumble or hit random keys, to embarrass herself. Maya stood beside the grand piano for a moment. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the glossy black surface. She hesitated before sitting down, gently pulling the bench closer. Her fingers hovered just above the keys, pale under the warm light. For a second, she looked like a different person, not a server, not someone invisible, but someone who belonged there. The guest joked again. "Let's see what you've got, Maestro." His voice echoed in the quiet hall. A few guests chuckled, but their laughter soon died when Maya's first note filled the air. It was soft, delicate, like the whisper of a memory. The sound carried across the hall, smooth and deep. Then came another note and another. The melody began to grow, slow and graceful, wrapping around the crowd like a gentle wave. The same man who had made the request stopped smiling. His jaw tightened slightly. His friends leaned forward, whispering in disbelief. The music that came from her fingers wasn't random. It was precise, emotional, full of pain and beauty. Maya's expression changed as she played. Her eyes half closed, her shoulders relaxed. She wasn't thinking anymore. She wasn't serving drinks or watching trays. She was remembering. The manager stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Even the bride had stopped mid-sentence, her eyes wide. The groom's arm rested on her shoulder, both lost in the sound. Every person in that hall felt something shift, as if the air itself had changed. That one unexpected request, meant as a joke, had turned into something powerful. Maya didn't know it yet, but that night would change everything for her. It started with a stranger's teasing, a piano, and a decision she never thought she'd make again. When the last note faded, silence filled the room, a deep, heavy silence that no one dared to break. Maya slowly lifted her hands off the keys, her heart still racing. For the first time in years, She felt alive, and in the crowd, people who had ignored her minutes ago now stared in awe. No one clapped. Not yet. They were still trying to understand what just happened. Maya stood up quietly, her apron slightly wrinkled. She gave a small nod, almost like an apology, and turned back to her duties, but the moment she stepped away, the whispers began again. Not about the food or the decorations, but about her. The wedding reception that had started like every other fancy event had just witnessed something unforgettable. And though she didn't know it yet, the world would soon learn the name of the girl who once was asked to just play a little, and ended up touching every heart in the room. Maya could still feel the warmth of the piano keys on her fingertips as she walked back to her serving tray. Her hands were trembling slightly, but she kept her face calm, pretending nothing had happened around her. The wedding had fallen into an odd kind of silence. The music from the speakers hadn't started again. Conversations had died, and even the clinking of glasses seemed quieter. People were looking at her, not with annoyance or dismissal anymore, but with shock and curiosity. She could feel their eyes following her as she poured more drinks. A few whispered her name, others simply called her the girl at the piano. The guest who had dared her to play was still sitting near the stage. His expression had completely changed. He wasn't smirking anymore. His eyes were fixed on her with something between guilt and admiration. Maya avoided his gaze. Her heart was still racing. She hadn't touched a piano in years. She told herself she wouldn't. Not after everything that had happened. But when she saw that grand piano tonight, something inside her refused to stay quiet. It was like the music had been waiting, buried under years of silence. At the catering counter, her manager approached her, his face pale and his mouth slightly open. "Maya," he whispered. What was that?" Maya smiled softly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean to cause a scene." "A scene?" he repeated. "You just turned a wedding into a concert. People are still in shock." She shrugged, eyes dropping to the floor. It was just one song. But it wasn't just one song. It was something she had carried inside her all these years. Grief, loss, and longing all locked inside until those keys opened the door again. A few minutes later, a woman in a shimmering silver gown walked up to her. It was the bride. Her smile was kind and her eyes were still glossy from tears. "You played beautifully," she said softly. "I didn't even know anyone could make that song sound so alive." Maya smiled politely. "Thank you, ma'am." "Did you learn that on your own?" the bride asked, curious. For a moment, Maya froze. The truth was tangled in pain. "I used to play a long time ago," she finally said. "Well," the bride said, squeezing her hand gently, "you made our wedding unforgettable tonight." When the bride walked away, Maya stood still for a second, trying to catch her breath. Her chest felt tight. Not from embarrassment, but from the storm of memories that had come rushing back. Years ago, she had sat on a very different stage, in front of hundreds of people who had come only to hear her. She remembered the soft lights, the applause, the feeling of being seen, not as a server, not as invisible, but as an artist. Then came the accident. The phone call that shattered her world. Her parents gone in an instant. Her dreams buried under hospital bills and grief. After that, Maya had sworn never to touch a piano again. The music reminded her too much of what she had lost, so she took small jobs, anything that would keep her busy and away from that sound. And yet tonight, in front of strangers, she had played again. Meanwhile, the guest who had asked her to play couldn't sit still anymore. He walked over, adjusting his tie awkwardly, trying to find the right words. "Hey," he said softly. "That was unbelievable." Maya glanced up, recognizing his voice. "Thank you, sir. I didn't mean to mock you earlier," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "I thought it'd be funny, to ask a server to play." "It's all right," Maya replied gently. "You couldn't have known." He nodded, looking at her with guilt. "No, I didn't. But I'm glad I did," he said, "because that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Maya smiled faintly, her eyes warm but distant. "Sometimes life surprises you," she said quietly, and turned to refill another glass across the room. The groom walked up to the band and whispered something. The musicians smiled and nodded. Then the groom motioned toward Maya. "Would you play again?" he asked her softly. "Just one more piece for the couple's dance." Maya hesitated. The thought of playing again so soon made her chest ache, but the crowd had already started murmuring excitedly. People were looking at her, waiting, hoping. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible, her manager whispered. "You don't have to." But she shook her head slowly. "No," she said, "I want to," as she sat back at the piano. The lights dimmed slightly and a soft hush fell over the hall. This time she didn't think. She felt. Her fingers moved like they knew the way home. The song was different now, gentler, full of warmth and quiet joy. The couple swayed slowly in the middle of the floor, their faces lit by candlelight. The melody wrapped around them like a soft promise. Tears shimmered in the bride's eyes as she rested her head on her husband's shoulder. Guests whispered in awe, some recording, others simply watching in silence. When Maya finished, the applause came like a wave. Louder, stronger, heartfelt. It wasn't the applause of polite appreciation. It was gratitude. Wonder and love. Maya bowed her head slightly, blinking back tears. She wasn't used to being seen anymore, but at that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, belonging. As she stood up from the piano, a small smile curved her lips. She didn't know what the rest of the night would bring, but something inside her had changed. That small, teasing request from a stranger had reopened the door she thought was locked forever, and as she looked around at the shining faces and tearful smiles, she realized maybe the music hadn't left her after all. It had just been waiting for the right moment to return. The crowd was still buzzing from Maya's second performance. People had forgotten about their drinks, their food, even the dance floor. Every eye in the grand hall had been fixed on the quiet young woman, who moments ago had been serving them wine. Now she had become the heart of the entire night, a mystery wrapped in music. As Maya walked away from the piano again, her hands still trembling, she could feel every beat of her heart echoing through her chest. She tried to return to her duties, but her tray felt heavier now, her uniform tighter. She had come here just to earn her shift's pay, but somehow, she had changed the atmosphere of a whole wedding. The song she had played, Claire de Lune, still floated faintly in the air. Guests hummed its tune softly as if trying to hold on to it. One little girl even walked up to the piano and pressed a few keys, smiling shyly. "It's magic," she whispered to her mother, who nodded tearfully. Maya kept her eyes down as she passed through the crowd, but everywhere she went, people whispered, "That's her, the piano girl. She used to be someone. Did you see how she played?" The words reached her ears like wind, soft but sharp, reminding her of the past she had tried so hard to bury. A few guests had already uploaded clips of her playing. Phones glowed in the dark corners of the hall, short videos spreading through social media before the night even ended. Someone had titled one, "Waitress plays piano at wedding. Stuns everyone," but Maya didn't know that yet. She just knew that something inside her felt lighter and heavier at the same time. She went to the back of the hall where the catering staff had gathered. Some clapped her on the shoulder, others smiled proudly. "You didn't tell us you could do that," one of them said, laughing. "You just became famous, Maya." She smiled shyly, shaking her head. "It's nothing," she said softly. "Just a song." But deep down she knew it wasn't nothing. It was everything. A piece of her heart she had kept locked away for years, now out in the open for everyone to see. She slipped out to the back terrace for air. The night was cool, the city lights glittered in the distance, and she could hear faint laughter from inside. She leaned against the railing, closing her eyes, trying to steady her breath. Her mind wandered to the days before everything fell apart. Her mother's laughter, her father's proud smile when she played her first recital, the thrill of performing before an audience, then the sound of sirens, the broken glass, the phone call that changed her forever for a long time. She had avoided music because it hurt too much. Every melody reminded her of what she'd lost. Every piano looked like a ghost of her past. But tonight, when her fingers touched those keys, it didn't hurt, it healed. As she stood there lost in thought, the door opened behind her. It was the same guest who had made the request earlier. He looked awkward, holding 2 glasses of water. "Hey," he said quietly. "Thought you might need this." Maya turned slightly, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said, taking the glass carefully. He scratched his neck, eyes down. "Look, I just wanted to say sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you." "You didn't," she replied simply. "You actually helped me remember something I forgot I loved." He blinked, surprised by her words. "Then I guess I'm glad I opened my mouth," he said with a small laugh. For the first time that night, Maya smiled. A real, gentle smile. "Maybe it was meant to happen," she said. "Sometimes life gives you a strange stage." Before he could reply, the wedding planner appeared at the door, waving excitedly. "Miss, they're asking for you again. The bride wants one more song before they cut the cake." Maya hesitated, her breath catching. She wasn't sure if she was ready for more, but the crowd inside had started clapping, chanting softly, "Play, play." It was overwhelming, yet beautiful. She glanced at the guest beside her, who smiled. "Looks like you're the star of the night now." Maya shook her head slightly. "I'm just passing through," she said. But her feet were already moving. Inside, the lights dimmed again. The chatter died as she approached the piano. Her apron still on, her hair slightly messy, but her presence commanded silence. She sat down slowly, her fingers trembling again. But this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. She began to play, softly at first, a piece she hadn't played in nearly a decade, her mother's favorite tune, "River Flows in You." The melody was gentle, smooth, filled with love and melancholy. It flowed through the hall like a whisper from the past. People swayed with the music, couples held hands, even the catering staff stood still, watching her with wide eyes. The bride leaned against her husband, tears running down her cheeks. "She's not just playing notes," she whispered. "She's speaking through them." When Maya finished, the applause was thunderous. Guests stood up, clapping, cheering, whistling. The sound echoed through the chandeliers. Bouncing off every wall, Maya stood slowly, tears glimmering in her eyes. She gave a small bow, her smile shy but radiant. The bride rushed up to her, hugging her tightly. "You have no idea what you just did for us," she said. "That song, my mother used to play it for me." Maya froze for a moment, her heart pounding. "Mine too," she whispered for a second. The two women just looked at each other, strangers connected by music, loss and love as the applause continued. Someone from the corner shouted, "Who is she?" "She's incredible." Another voice said, "Get her name, she's going viral." Maya stood there overwhelmed, her emotions swirling between fear, gratitude, and disbelief. She didn't know that by tomorrow morning, her face would be all over the internet, that people would call her the piano waitress, that thousands would search for her story. But at that moment, none of that mattered. All she felt was peace, for the first time in years. She wasn't running from her past, she was embracing it. The night had started with an unusual request, and now it had become something magical. The sound of her piano still lingered in the air like a blessing, and though she didn't realize it yet, this was only the beginning of Maya's return to the world she thought she had lost forever. The wedding hall had changed. It no longer felt like a simple celebration. It felt like something sacred had happened there. The chandeliers sparkled brighter. The guests spoke softer, as if they didn't want to disturb the air that still carried Maya's music. The video cameras were off now, but the memory of what they had just witnessed was etched into every heart in that room. Maya stood near the back, clutching her tray tightly. Her eyes were still red from tears, but there was a calmness inside her that hadn't existed for years. She had played her mother's favorite song and felt something break, not in pain, but in release. For so long she had avoided the piano like a wound she didn't want to touch, but tonight it had become her healing. The bride and groom were now cutting the cake, laughing joyfully, but their glances often turned toward Maya. People approached her with smiles, compliments, and even questions. "Where did you learn to play like that? Are you a professional? Can we find you online?" She smiled shyly at each one, shaking her head. "No, I'm just a server," she said quietly, but no one believed her. Across the hall, the guest who had dared her to play still sat silently, staring at the piano he had stopped drinking hours ago. His friends had gone back to dancing, but he remained lost in thought. He couldn't forget how her music had made him feel. It was as if someone had reached into his chest and touched his soul. Meanwhile, Maya stepped outside for a breath of air. The night breeze brushed her cheeks, carrying with it the faint hum of distant laughter. She looked up at the stars, her heart strangely full. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like a ghost walking through life. She felt alive, real, seen. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "That was extraordinary," Maya turned, startled. A man in a dark suit stood by the garden arch, older than the others, maybe in his late 40s. His eyes were kind but sharp, the kind that noticed things most people missed. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, stepping closer. "I just wanted to say your performance. It wasn't ordinary." "Thank you," Maya replied softly, unsure of what else to say. "I've heard thousands of pianists," the man continued, "but very few can make people feel something the way you did." She looked down, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just played what I remembered," she said. "It's been a long time since I touched a piano." He smiled faintly. "That's what makes it remarkable." He handed her a small card. "My name's Daniel Clark. I work with a recording studio in the city. If you ever decide to play again, really play, give me a call." Maya blinked. Stunned, she took the card hesitantly, staring at it. The words Silverline Records were printed in neat gold letters. "I'm not sure I can," she whispered. Daniel tilted his head. "You already did," he said gently. And with a polite nod, he walked back toward the hall, leaving her standing alone under the stars. Maya's fingers tightened around the card. The idea of performing again both thrilled and terrified her. She thought she had buried that part of her life forever, but now it was knocking on her door again. When she returned inside, the night was winding down. Guests were saying their goodbyes, the band was packing up. The bride found her again and hugged her one last time. "You made our night unforgettable," she said. "Promise me you'll never stop playing," Maya smiled. "I'll try," she said softly, though in her heart she wasn't sure she could. As she walked toward the exit, she passed the piano one more time. The polished black surface reflected her face faintly. Her hand reached out and brushed the keys gently. A soft note escaped. One single sound. Pure and haunting, it echoed through the empty hall, bouncing off the walls like a ghost whispering goodbye. "Maya," a voice called behind her. It was the guest again, the one who had started it all. He looked nervous but sincere. "I just wanted to say, thank you." "For what?" she asked, tilting her head. "For reminding me what real beauty feels like," he said. "You made me realize I've been chasing noise, not music." Maya smiled faintly. "Sometimes it takes a stranger to make us listen again," she replied. Her words lingered between them, quiet but powerful. The next morning, the sunlight spilled through Maya's small apartment window. She woke up late, exhausted but strangely happy. She made tea, sat on the edge of her bed, and stared at the business card Daniel had given her. The golden letters glimmered in the light. Out of curiosity, she opened her phone. Her notifications were flooded. Dozens of messages from friends, coworkers, even strangers, all linking to the same thing, a video. She clicked on it. The title read, "Waitress plays piano at wedding, guests cry instantly." The thumbnail showed her sitting at the piano, eyes closed, fingers glowing under the chandelier's light. Her heart skipped a beat as she pressed play. The comments poured in below the video. "This can't be real. She plays like she's lived through every note. Who is she? Someone please find her name. I haven't cried at a wedding video before, but wow." The view count was rising, and 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, it was going viral. Maya covered her mouth, her heart pounding. She had wanted to stay invisible for so long, and now the world was watching her. For a long time, she just sat there, watching herself on the screen, the girl in the plain black apron, who had found her voice again without meaning to. Finally, she looked down at the card again, her fingers brushing the embossed letters. For the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid of the piano. She felt drawn to it outside. The city hummed with life somewhere. People were still sharing her video, still talking about her, still crying over her song. Maya took a deep breath, whispering to herself, "Maybe it's time." And as she looked toward her small second-hand keyboard sitting in the corner of the room, she smiled. The sound that had once broken her was now calling her home again. Morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of Maya's apartment, painting soft golden stripes across the floor. The world outside was already awake, cars honking, birds chirping, people hurrying to work, but inside, it was quiet except for the steady rhythm of Maya's heart. She sat at the edge of her bed, still in her pajamas, staring at the glowing screen of her phone. The video of her piano performance had passed 1.2 million views. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through the endless stream of comments. Each one was filled with shock, admiration, or tears. She's playing like she's telling her life story. Someone please find this woman. I can't stop replaying this. The words blurred before her eyes. Maya couldn't believe that the world, complete strangers, were suddenly moved by something she had buried for so long. She set the phone down and covered her face. A laugh and a sob escaped at the same time. She had never wanted fame, not like this. For years she had lived quietly, working late shifts, paying bills, keeping her head down. Now millions of people were talking about her, a woman they didn't even know existed yesterday. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her old friend. Leah, Maya, is this really you? The video's everywhere, call me. Maya stared at the message, her throat tightening. She hadn't spoken to Leah in almost 6 years. Not since she vanished from her old life after the accident. She couldn't bear to face anyone from the music world. It was too painful, too full of memories, but now, it felt like those locked doors were creaking open again. She took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, it's me." Within minutes, Leah called, her voice bursting through the speaker. "Maya, my God, I thought you disappeared. You're on every news channel right now." Maya blinked. "News channel?" "Yes." Leah laughed breathlessly. "They're calling you the wedding pianist with the soul of an angel. Reporters are trying to find your name, Maya. This is huge." Maya sat frozen, part of her heart racing with fear, the other with disbelief. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Do?" Leah said. "You do what you were born to do and play again. This is your second chance," Maya hesitated, looking toward the old keyboard in the corner, dusty, untouched for years. She had walked past it like it was a ghost haunting her apartment, but now it looked different, almost alive. "Leah," Maya whispered. "I'm not ready." Her friend's voice softened. "Maya, the world has already heard you. They felt you. You are ready. You just don't believe it yet." After the call ended, Maya sat in silence for a long time. The sunlight had shifted, and the shadows now danced across the piano keys like soft fingers urging her to play. Slowly she walked toward it. The stool creaked as she sat down. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. She took a deep breath and pressed one note. The sound was faint, but it filled the room with something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. She pressed another, then another, until a small melody began to form. It wasn't perfect, her fingers stiff, her timing rusty, but it was hers. And as she played, tears streamed down her cheeks. It felt like greeting an old friend she thought she had lost forever. Every note carried both pain and healing. Her apartment walls echoed softly, as if whispering back the life she had once abandoned. Hours passed without her noticing. By the time she stopped, the room was glowing with afternoon light. Her phone buzzed again, this time. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Miss Maya?" A calm male voice replied. "This is Daniel Clark. We met at the wedding last night." Maya sat up straight, surprised. "Mr. Clark, hello?" "I hope you don't mind me calling," he said. "I wanted to talk about your music. Have you seen the news?" She smiled faintly. "I've seen enough." "Good," he said warmly. "Because the world has too. My studio has been flooded with calls asking about you. I wasn't sure you'd want this kind of attention. But, if you're willing, we'd like to record you." Maya froze. Her heartbeat quickened. "Record me?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Just you and the piano, no pressure, no labels. Just a story, your story, and through music. I think people need to hear it." She didn't know what to say. She had once dreamed of something like this, before everything collapsed. Before life became about survival instead of creation. "I'll think about it," she finally said softly. "That's all I ask," Daniel replied. "Take your time, Maya. But remember, the world is listening now." After the call, she sat quietly, the card still in her hand. For the first time in years, her fear didn't outweigh her hope. That evening, she took a walk. The streets felt different, or maybe she did. At a small cafe, she overheard 2 women talking. "Did you see that video of the waitress playing piano?" One said, "I cried like a baby." Maya smiled to herself. It was strange hearing her story told by strangers. When she got home, she opened her laptop and watched the video again. The part that made her cry wasn't the music. It was the look on her face, the moment when she forgot she was just a server, when she became herself again. The next morning, she sent Daniel a message. "I'll do it." And that's how, a week later, Maya found herself walking into a small recording studio in the city. The sign above the door read Silverline Records. Daniel greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome back to the world of music," he said. As she sat at the grand piano in the recording room, surrounded by soft lights and microphones, Maya closed her eyes. This time, She wasn't playing for money or approval or even fame. She was playing for the people who had lost something and needed to remember that beauty could still be found after pain. When her fingers touched the keys, the world outside disappeared, and in that small studio, a new song was born. One that told the story of a woman who once served champagne at a wedding and ended up serving the world her heart. One note at a time, the first note echoed through the studio like a heartbeat. Soft, trembling, alive, Maya sat at the grand piano, the same model she used to play years ago in crowded concert halls. Yet this time there was no audience, no applause, just silence, microphones, and Daniel watching quietly from the other side of the glass. Her fingers danced gently across the keys, slower at first, like she was testing old memories, then faster, freer. Music filled the air like sunlight through clouds. The melody was her story and the loss, the years of silence, the unexpected return, and the fragile hope now blooming inside her. Daniel leaned forward in his chair, his jaw tightening with emotion. He had produced hundreds of artists, but what Maya was doing wasn't just performance, it was resurrection. Every note carried truth, a kind of ache that couldn't be taught. When the final chord faded, Maya exhaled shakily. She hadn't realized she was holding her breath. Daniel pressed the talk button on the console. That was... He paused, voice thick. That was something the world needs to hear again. Maya smiled faintly. It felt like... Breathing for the first time in years, she whispered. Her reflection in the piano lid looked back at her, older, softer but stronger over the next few weeks. Maya kept returning to the studio. Every morning she'd walk through the same glass doors, her nerves slowly melting away. The sessions weren't easy. Some songs made her cry mid-play. Others made her laugh. Daniel never rushed her. He understood that what she was creating wasn't an album. It was healing. Sometimes he'd ask her about certain melodies. Where did this come from? And Maya would shrug, smiling sadly. From somewhere I thought I'd lost. News outlets kept chasing her story. Social media called her the miracle pianist. Hashtags flooded timelines. And even international blogs wrote about her comeback. But Maya didn't read any of it. She had stopped caring about the noise. She was too busy rediscovering her sound one afternoon. After recording a piece that sounded like gentle rain, Daniel walked into the studio with his tablet. You should see this, he said, turning the screen toward her. It was a video compilation. Fans from around the world playing her wedding performance. People from Japan, Brazil, Italy, and even small children in living rooms were trying to mimic her style. Some played beautifully, others stumbled through the notes. But each one had the same caption, inspired by Maya. Maya's hand covered her mouth, tears welling up. They're playing my version? She whispered. Daniel nodded. They're not copying your skill. Maya, they're chasing your emotion. You reminded people that music isn't about perfection. It's about feeling. She stared at the screen, her chest tightening. All her life she had dreamed of touching hearts. Then she gave up believing she ever could again. Yet here she was, reaching people she'd never met. Through a simple melody played at a wedding. That night, Maya stayed behind after everyone left. The studio lights dimmed to a golden glow and she began to play alone. No microphones, no recording, just her and the piano. The song that came out was softer than anything she'd ever written. A lullaby for her parents. Her voice broke as she whispered under her breath. This is for you. As her hands moved, she remembered everything. Her father sitting in the front row of her first recital. Her mother's laughter from the kitchen when she practiced at home. The empty silence after the accident, and now, this, the moment when music stopped being her pain and became her peace again. When she finished, she sat still for a long time, eyes closed, letting the quiet settle. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt sacred. The next morning, she arrived at the studio to find Daniel waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a bright grin. We're ready, he said. Ready for what? For the release, he replied. Your debut performance, or shall I say your return? Maya blinked, startled. You mean a concert? He nodded. A small one, just 50 seats, mostly by invitation. But we're streaming it online. You'll play your new pieces live. It's time, Maya. Her stomach tightened with fear and excitement. What if I can't? She whispered. Daniel smiled. You already have, he said. You've been performing since the night that wedding guest dared you to play. She laughed softly, shaking her head. It still feels unreal. That's how you know it's real, Daniel replied now. Let's give the world a night they'll never forget. The week leading up to the concert was a blur of rehearsals, press messages, and sleepless nights. Maya kept her routine simple. Wake up, practice, drink tea, breathe. She didn't let herself think too far ahead. She focused only on the sound of her fingers against the keys. When the night finally arrived, she stood backstage in a simple white dress, the same one she'd worn to her last recital years ago. Her palms were sweaty, her heartbeat wild. Through the curtain, she could hear the soft murmur of guests and the hum of live cameras. Daniel squeezed her shoulder gently. They're not here for perfection. They're here for truth, just give them that. She nodded, inhaled deeply, and walked onto the stage. The lights were bright but warm. The audience quieted instantly. And in that stillness, she saw faces. Some familiar, some strangers, and all waiting. Maya sat down, her fingers brushing the keys, and then, like a sigh, the music began. The melody told everything she couldn't say in her pain, her loss, her rediscovery, and her gratitude. Every note shimmered through the air, raw and alive. When she reached the final chord, tears rolled freely down her cheeks, but she didn't stop playing until the hall was completely still. And then thunderous applause, not polite, not rehearsed, but real. People stood clapping, crying, some shouting her name. Maya stood, bowing with trembling hands, her smile wide and genuine. She looked toward the front row and froze. There among the audience were the bride, the groom, and the very guest who had asked her to play that night. All three were smiling through tears. In that moment, Maya realized something profound. None of this had been an accident. Every twist, every tragedy, every silence had led her here. She wasn't just playing piano anymore. She was playing life, one note at a time. The lights dimmed. The applause thundered on, and Maya stood frozen on the stage, her chest heaving with emotion. Her heart felt as if it might burst. The audience's cheers washed over her like a wave, loud, endless, and full of love. It wasn't just a sound. It was a message. It said, "We see you, we hear you, we feel you." Daniel came onto the stage, smiling with pride. He whispered softly in her ear, "You did it." But Maya barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on three faces in the front row, the bride, the groom, and that guest who had once turned her life upside down with a single teasing request. After the show, when the hall began to empty, they approached her. The bride hugged her tightly, laughing and crying at the same time. "You changed our lives, Maya," she said. "That night, we thought we were just hearing a song, but it became a story we'll tell forever." The groom nodded, smiling. "You brought something real to our wedding, something money couldn't buy." And then the guest stepped forward, his expression soft, different from before. "I came here tonight to tell you something," he said quietly. "That night when I asked you to play, I was being careless, arrogant maybe, but I think fate used my foolishness to bring you back to what you were born for." Maya's throat tightened. She looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of mockery, but there was none, only sincerity. "You didn't humiliate me," she said softly. "You reminded me that I still existed." The man smiled faintly. "Then maybe I owe you a thank you too," he said. "Because that night, watching you play, changed something in me. I haven't stopped thinking about it since." He handed her a small envelope. "It's not much, but it's something I wanted you to have." After he left, Maya opened it. Inside was a handwritten note and a ticket. The note read, "This is a seat at my sister's memorial concert next week. The song you played that night, Claire de Lune, was her favorite. I think she would have loved to hear you play it again if you're willing. I'd be honored if you performed it there." Maya stared at the words, her vision blurring. She remembered the moment after her first performance when he had whispered something about his late sister. Back then she hadn't understood why his eyes had looked so heavy with emotion. Now she did. That night, lying in bed, she couldn't sleep. The city lights flickered through her window. But her mind was far away, back in that wedding hall, back at the piano, back at the beginning. She thought about the strange chain of events, one dare, one song, one crowd, and all leading her here. She smiled softly, whispering, "Maybe everything really does happen for a reason." The following week, Maya found herself standing backstage once again. But this time it wasn't for fame, cameras, or interviews. It was for something deeper, personal. The memorial concert was held in a small, beautiful hall filled with flowers, candles, and photographs of a young woman smiling. the guest's sister, a musician herself who had passed away 2 years ago. As Maya stepped onto the stage, she saw the guest sitting in the front row again, his eyes already shining. The room was silent except for the faint hum of people breathing. She sat down at the piano, her hands steady now. When she began to play Clair de Lune, the same melody that had changed her life, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. The notes floated like feathers, delicate, sincere. Every chord spoke not of sadness but remembrance, the kind that brings peace instead of pain. Tears streamed down faces all across the room. The music became a bridge between the living and the lost, between grief and gratitude. Between endings and beginnings, when the final note faded, the audience remained still for several seconds. Then slowly they rose to their feet, the applause soft but filled with reverence. The guest approached her after the performance, his eyes wet. "You gave her voice back tonight," he whispered. "Thank you." Maya smiled gently, her own tears glimmering. "She was here," she said, tapping her chest. "Right here, after the memorial." Maya walked outside into the cool evening air. The moon was high above the city, glowing just like the night she first played again. She tilted her head back and smiled at it, whispering, "Thank you for bringing me back." In the following months, Maya's story continued to inspire millions. She released an album titled The Wedding Song, a collection of the pieces she had played during her rebirth. The world fell in love with it, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. People from around the globe sent her letters. Messages poured in from parents who played her music to comfort their children, from widows who said her songs helped them cry again, from young pianists who said she gave them courage to keep going. One letter stood out, though. It came from a little girl in a small town, written in messy handwriting. "Dear Miss Maya, I saw your video on my mom's phone. I didn't know people could make music that makes you feel like crying but happy too. I started piano lessons because of you when I play. I pretend I'm the lady in the black dress who played for the stars. Love, Emma." Maya folded the letter carefully and kept it on her piano. Every time she played, she glanced at it, a reminder that her story wasn't just about her. It was about connection. One night, as she practiced in her apartment, Daniel called. "You've been invited to perform at the International Music Revival Gala," he said excitedly. "It's the biggest stage of your life." "Maya," she laughed softly. "Funny," she said. "It all started because someone asked me to play at a wedding." Daniel chuckled. "Sometimes destiny dresses up as coincidence," Maya smiled, looking down at her hands, the same hands that had once carried trays, now carrying music again. "Then I guess I'll keep saying yes to destiny," she said. As she played softly that night, the city outside seemed to hum along, and somewhere out there, maybe in another wedding, another quiet hall, another lost soul, someone was listening, waiting for their own music to begin. The night of the International Music Revival Gala arrived like a dream, wrapped in gold. The grand hall shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, every seat filled with faces from across the world, musicians, critics, fans, and people who had come not just to hear music, but to witness a miracle reborn. Cameras flashed, murmurs filled the air, and her name appeared in glowing letters above the stage. Maya Lin, the woman who played her way back to life. Backstage, Maya stood in front of a mirror, her reflection calm yet trembling with emotion. She was no longer the quiet server in a black apron. Tonight, she was an artist, a storyteller, a survivor. Her white satin dress shimmered under the soft lights, her hair neatly pinned but with one loose curl falling against her cheek. She smiled faintly, remembering the girl she once was, the one who hid her talent beneath exhaustion and fear. Daniel stood beside her, his tone both proud and gentle. "You've come a long way," he said. Maya smiled. "I almost didn't make it," he nodded. "That's what makes it worth it. They're not here just to hear music, Maya. They're here to feel something only you can make them feel." The stage manager gave the signal, and Daniel whispered, "Go give them truth." As she stepped into the light, the audience rose in applause. The sound rolled through the hall like thunder. Maya paused at the edge of the stage. Overwhelmed, her chest tightened not from fear but from gratitude. Every face in the crowd blurred together like stars. Her journey flashed through her mind, the broken past, the wedding, the piano, the man's request, the viral video, the healing, the rediscovery. When she sat at the piano, her fingers trembled just slightly. She glanced down at the keys. whispering under her breath, "You and me again, old friend." The hall grew silent, even the air seemed to wait. Then in the first note, soft, pure, glowing like moonlight. The song she played wasn't any famous composition this time. It was hers, a piece she had written after the memorial. After the tears, after the rediscovery, she had titled it Homecoming. The melody started fragile, like a memory waking from sleep, then swelled with quiet strength. Every note carried a story. A waitress who once poured champagne, now pouring out her soul. A lost girl finding her parents again through sound. A world that paused to listen to one heart beating in rhythm with its own. In the front row, familiar faces sat together. The bride, the groom, the once arrogant guest Daniel, and even Leah, her old friend who had come crying backstage before the show began. The guest clasped his hands tightly, eyes glistening, realizing that what began as a careless joke had become the spark of a destiny he'd never imagined. As Maya's music rose, so did emotion. The audience leaned forward as if pulled by invisible strings. Some closed their eyes, others wiped tears silently. Critics who had written thousands of reviews sat speechless, unable to find words that could capture what they were hearing. Midway through the song, Maya shifted into a softer tone, her touch delicate, almost trembling. The melody felt like forgiveness, not just toward life, but toward herself. Every chord whispered, "It's okay now. You've survived." In that moment, she thought she saw her mother's face in the reflection of the piano lid, smiling faintly proud. A tear slid down Maya's cheek, but she didn't stop. Her hands moved with grace, her heart leading where sheet music never could. And then the final note, slow, deep, beautiful. It lingered in the air long after her fingers lifted. The silence that followed was electric, heavy, sacred. Then came the sound, applause like a storm breaking over mountains. People stood clapping, shouting her name. Throwing roses toward the stage, Daniel stood at the side of the stage. Clapping with tears streaming down his face, the bride and groom held hands tightly, whispering something to each other through their smiles. And the guest, the man who once teased her, stood in silent awe, whispering, "I'm sorry," even though she didn't need to hear it. Maya stood, bowed deeply, and for the first time in her life she smiled without fear. The sound of applause washed over her, and she knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. After the show, when the lights dimmed and the crowd slowly faded away, Maya stayed behind on stage. The hall was empty now, quiet, only the echo of her final note still hanging in the air. She sat back down at the piano, running her hand across the keys. "We did it," she whispered. Smiling through tears, Daniel walked in quietly. "You changed people tonight," he said softly. Maya looked up. "Music did that, I just remembered how to listen." He smiled. "So what's next for you, Maya?" She laughed gently. "I think I'll keep telling stories through sound, through heartbeats, through silence." A week later, her performance was broadcast globally, reaching millions. The comments poured in, from cancer patients playing her music during treatment, from young girls saying they wanted to learn piano, from people saying her story reminded them that it's never too late to begin again. One message stood out among the thousands. It came from a man in a small town who wrote, "I was about to sell my piano after my wife died. Then I saw your story. I sat down to play for the first time in years. Thank you for reminding me that music doesn't die. It just waits for us to find it again." Maya smiled when she read it, realizing that her pain had turned into someone else's healing. Her story had become a bridge for others to cross. Months later, she started a small foundation, Keys of Hope, a program that provided pianos to orphanages and hospitals. Every time a child's fingers touched a key for the first time, Maya knew the cycle had come full circle. And sometimes, late at night, she'd visit wedding halls quietly, standing near the piano while another celebration unfolded. She'd smile, remembering how it all began. One dare, one song one night if someone noticed her and, "Are you the famous pianist from that video?" She'd laugh softly and say, "No, I'm just someone who loves the sound of second chances." Because for Maya, music was no longer about applause or fame or perfection. It was about connection, about breathing life into forgotten hearts, about turning silence into something beautiful again. And somewhere in another hall, maybe another server stood near another piano, waiting for a chance, waiting for a voice to whisper, "Play something." And when she did, the world would listen again and feel, just like it did the night Maya Lin played her way back home.